If you believe journalism is the last line of defense in a democracy, or if you're drawn to stories of courage in the face of surveillance, threats, and state power, or if you want to understand how a single journalist's murder can reveal the fault lines of a nation's democracy, if so, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I'll be reviewing I Am on the Hit List, A Journalist's Murder and the Rise of Autocracy in India by Rollo Romig. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today's book is I Am on the Hit List, A Journalist's Murder and the Rise of Autocracy in India by Rollo Romig. I picked this one up as part of my ongoing interest in Pulitzer Prize finalists and winners, and because the subject matter in particular, the press freedom, political violence, and the rise of authoritarianism, felt quite urgent and deeply important. And this book tells the story of Gauri Lankesh, a journalist whose assassination in 2017 became a chilling symbol of the growing threats to democracy and dissent in India. The author is an American journalist, and he brings his lens to this powerful story not just to memorialize Lankesh, but to show the broader currents of religious nationalism and state surveillance and political intimidation that is sweeping across the country. However, before we dive in, I want to remind you that this review is part of my Pulitzer Prize playlist, where I review all of the finalists and winners from the Pulitzer Prize book categories. And I can now officially say I read every single one. And instead of spacing out my thoughts over the next few months, I've decided to go all in. So welcome to Pulitzer Prize week. Actually, it'll be weeks. It'll be a couple weeks of these. If these do not sound interesting to you, then I apologize. Come back in a couple weeks, and you should hopefully find one of the usual things that I cover that will be a little more interesting to you. With that, as I do my deep dives into the Pulitzer Prize books, and I look at these books that range from fiction to nonfiction and memoir to poetry to see exactly what I think of them. Hopefully, you guys are also interested in that conversation. And if you are, please check out the playlist for the 2025 Pulitzer Prize finalists and winners. And of course, if that interests you, go check out my playlist for last year as well. I did the same thing. And if you would like my initial reaction to the books without actually having read most of them, you can also check out my reaction video when I first saw the finalists and winners. As we dig into this book, let's actually take a second to look at the author himself. This is his first book, but just a little bit of background on him. And also, before I say even his name, I should apologize now that I am going to say a lot of names wrong in this review. I'm sure of it. I tried looking them up, but by the time I started to record, I'd already forgotten the ones that I had managed to remember, or I had already forgotten the ones that I had managed to look up. And then I realized there were just too many for me to look up. This is one of the challenges that you have with something that deals with a subject matter that is not your expertise. And unfortunately, India, modern politics, or history is not one of my expertise. That being said, let me talk again about the author. So Rollo Romig is a journalist and contributing writer at the New York Times Magazine, where he has covered global religion, politics, and culture. He's written extensively on topics ranging from evangelical Christianity in the US to Muslim identity in the Balkans, but his work on India, particularly in the wake of rising Hindu nationalism, stands out for its nuance, its empathy, and its depth. Romig has lived in both the US and India, and that bicultural experience informs the way he tells this story, with the perspective of an outsider who's done his homework and the insight of someone who clearly cares deeply about the region. This book, I Am on the Hit List, is actually his first book, and it draws on years of reporting to offer a harrowing but a very human portrait of not just one murdered journalist, but a country at a crossroads. So let's dig into a summary of the book itself. I guess I should give you a little bit of a spoiler warning. This is a nonfiction, and I think the title of it will let you know from the get-go that the journalist at the center of it is assassinated. She is killed. I also might give some details that you don't want to hear just yet. So if so, then skip this until you've had a chance to read the book, or just come and see what exactly I understood about this book. With that being said, here is my book summary. This book is an unflinching examination of the growing threats to democratic institution and press freedom in the world's largest democracy. The book opens with the assassination of Gauri Lankesh in 2017 outside her home in Bangalore. A journalist, editor, and activist, Lankesh was known for her fiery criticism of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, probably didn't say that right, but it is usually known by the initials BJP, and its ideological parent, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, which I definitely didn't say right, but that is also usually known by the acronym RSS. Her death was not random. She had received threats and was on a literal hit list shared among Hindu extremist groups. The title of the book is drawn from this fact. Others on the list include activists, rationalists, and journalists. Romig uses Lankesh's story as a portal into the broader climate of repression and fear spreading across India. He follows the official investigation into her death, uncovering how the alleged killers were a part of a loosely connected but ideologically aligned network of Hindu extremists who had also been linked to previous killings, including the murders of Narendra Dabholkar, Govind Pansari, and M. Kalburgi. All intellectuals that were targeted for speaking out against religious dogma and nationalism. In one of the more reflective digressions in the book, Romig actually explores the deep and layered history of Christianity in India, particularly the legend of St. Thomas the Apostle, often referred to as Doubting Thomas. According to long-standing tradition, Thomas arrived in India around 52 CE, landing on the Malabar coast, which is now in modern-day Kerala, and began spreading Christianity well before it reached much of Europe. He is believed to have founded several churches and baptized many, including members of Brahmin families. His journey eventually led him to the east coast of India, where he was martyred near present-day Chennai, Madras, which is the very city where Romig begins his own journey into India's contemporary religious and political upheaval. The author invokes the figure of Thomas as a way of contemplating doubt and faith and obviously martyrdom. Thomas's role as both a skeptic and a believer echoes Gauri Lankesh's own complex position, fighting passionately for truth and justice while refusing to conform to any single institutional narrative. The author contrasts the mythic legend of Thomas with the current experience of Indian Christians who are increasingly targeted by nationalist groups, accusing them of forced conversions or Western collusion. And of course, the irony is pointed. One of the oldest Christian traditions in the world is under threat in the very place where it took root. The history of Thomas also serves as a thematic echo of Gauri's story. Both figures challenged orthodoxy, both were killed for their beliefs, and both left behind a legacy that is reverently preserved by those who believe in their mission. The author uses this historical reflection not only to contextualize religious pluralism in India, but to underscore what is at stake in the erosion of that pluralism. And then, of course, moving back to the present, the author doesn't stop at the crime itself. He spends much of the book exploring Lankesh's life, her upbringing as the daughter of famed journalist and poet P. Lankesh, and her career as the editor of Lankesh Patrike, and her eventual split with the publication over ideological differences. He details how she went on to found Gauri Lankesh Patrike, which is a Kannada language weekly known for its investigative work and no-holds-barred editorial stance. And Lankesh's evolution from journalist to full-fledged political actor is traced with care, showing both her idealism and her resolve. Romig also gives voice to the other side, of course, not to endorse it, but to understand it. He interviews Hindu nationalist ideologues, police officers, and politicians, and describes the rise of the BJP under Narendra Modi with special attention to the use of social media, propaganda, and disinformation campaigns. And the book examines the way dissent is increasingly labeled as anti-national and how journalists are targeted with lawsuits, online mobs, and violence. Throughout, the author returns to the larger question of democratic backsliding. India is nominally still a democracy, but the control over its institutions like the courts, the press, law enforcement has become increasingly centralized and politically motivated. Gauri's murder is treated not as an isolated event, but as emblematic of a system in which dissent is dangerous and the truth is increasingly malleable. And so the author also weaves in his own experience as a journalist, including the challenges he faced in reporting the book, the surveillance, the intimidation, and the difficulty of maintaining objectivity in a very polarized landscape. His voice remains clear, but I would say never domineering, and he allows the Indian voices, especially Gauri's, to remain the central focus. In the final chapters, the author reflects on what Gauri Lankesh's death means for India's future. And he describes the continuing threat faced by others on the hit list, the unresolved questions around the investigation, and the muted public response to the violence. Yet he also highlights resistance. He talks about journalists continuing to report, and families seeking justice, and of course, other activists that refused to be silenced. Based on the subject matter, I knew I would find this book engaging, and I certainly did. India's vastness made it incredibly difficult to trace every element of its social and political shifts, especially when it comes to tracking how pluralism, dissent, and democracy operate across such a diverse landscape. That's why the author's decision to center the story around a single figure, Gauri Lankesh, was so effective. By focusing on her life, her work, and ultimately her death, the book personalizes the broader crisis. It draws the reader into the tragedy in a way that data and general history can't really do. At the same time, the book made me keenly aware of how much I don't know. While it gave me a deeper understanding of Gauri Lankesh and the context that shaped her as both a journalist and a target, it also highlighted how much more there is to grasp about the rise of Hindu nationalism and its impact on India's religious, cultural, and political diversity. It left me with a sense of urgency, not just to mourn a life lost, but to better understand the larger forces at play, especially I appreciated the historical digressions that reminded readers of India's complexity, whether it was the story of Doubting Thomas, the history of caste resistance, or the legacy of partition. These sections served as reminders that the present moment in India is deeply entangled with centuries of overlapping traditions and tensions. The author doesn't flatten India's history. He honors its contradictions, which made the book feel even more urgent and thoughtful, and I would say worth returning to. So who is this for? This book is for anyone interested in the precarious state of democracy and press freedom, not just in India, but around the world. If you've been following global trends of authoritarianism, suppression of dissent, or the persecution of journalists, this book offers a powerful case study in how those forces manifest on a personal level. It's also for readers who appreciate narrative nonfiction that doesn't just report facts, but brings them to life through deeply human storytelling. If you're interested in books like this, then there are many other similar accounts of journalists that get embedded in various major movements that could certainly resonate with you. And I think that you would also enjoy this one. I'd also say that students of Indian history or politics or religion will also find much to engage with here, particularly those curious about Hindu nationalism, as well as, I'd say, caste dynamics, religious pluralism, and the enduring tensions between India's democratic ideals and its authoritarian impulses. And finally, if you're someone who believes in the power and the danger of spreading truth to power, this book will challenge and inform you, and I think probably move you. So who is this not for? Well, this book may not be for readers who want a happy resolution. Not only is the event at the heart of the book a tragedy itself, it's an ongoing issue, so any resolution would probably be undermined with time. And while the central story is about the life and assassination of journalist Gauri Lankesh, the book deliberately widens its lens to explore historical, political, and religious complexity. So for readers looking for a tight linear biography, this might feel just a little too diffuse or maybe occasionally meandering. It's also not for those who want their nonfiction to remain strictly objective in tone. The author is a journalist, but he is not neutral in his sympathies. He paints a vivid portrait of Gauri Lankesh's courage and convictions while offering a sobering critique of the Hindu nationalist movement. Readers who are uncomfortable with political commentary, especially if they hold different ideological positions, may find this book challenging or even provocative. And finally, it's not for readers who are unfamiliar with Indian history or politics and unwilling to do a bit of intellectual work. The author does explain a lot, but he also assumes a baseline curiosity and engagement. If you're not willing to sit with complexity or look up terms or regions or people you might not immediately recognize, then some of the book's richness could be lost on you. I Am on the Hit List is a powerful, intimate, and sobering portrait of both a woman and a country at a crossroads. The author's approach of following Gauri Lankesh's life and murder while weaving in centuries of India's complex religious and political history gives the book a depth that lingers well after you finish it. It doesn't offer easy answers, but it does offer clarity in the form of moral urgency and historical context. What makes this book especially effective is its structure. By centering one person's story within a broader, often overwhelming national narrative, the author helps us grasp what's at stake, not just in India, but anywhere democracy and dissent are under threat. The book is at once journalistic, historical, and even elegiac. It's not an uplifting read, but it's an essential one. And while I walked away with greater clarity about Gauri Lankesh herself and the forces that led to her death, I also walked away with a deeper understanding of how fragile pluralism can be and how vital it is to defend it. The author doesn't just write about India. He's also implicitly writing about what it means to be free in any nation that is struggling with its identity. I would love to know your guys' thoughts on this book, on any other book in the Pulitzer Prize finalists and winners. I would like to know what you guys are thinking in general. Please let me know in the comments. And of course, please check out the playlist that I've already mentioned for this, or if you're interested in something else, I cover lots of things. Again, the name of the channel is Spencer Reads Everything. I'm sure you can find something else that interests you if this is not exactly your thing. And if you are enjoying my videos, please share them. The more people that know about my videos and my channel, the more videos I can make. And don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.